So now let's talk about the test because we have to do tests a little differently given the circumstances, right? So I've kind of decided to do our test different than how we've done them before. So what I'm going to do is I'll show it to you on screen. I'll kind of read through the directions, and then I'll take questions, and then we'll talk about like when it's going to actually happen and stuff. So looking at the test here. So how we are doing it, this is going to be a short answer only test. Now that sounds big and scary, but there's a reason for it. I just really couldn't find a good way to do multiple choice questions, at least right now, in this format. And we had a lot of topics to cover. And so I just decided to kind of take all of the topics and split them up into 5 questions because we have topics from the Renaissance all the way through the French Revolution. So there are 5 questions, and you're going to pick 3 of them to answer. So that's really important here. You're only doing 3 out of the 5 questions for points. There is not extra credit for doing all 5, so there's no reason to. Just pick the 3 that you are most confident with and do those ones. So I know a lot of people have been gone for some of these topics when we covered them in class. So that's why I kind of wanted to give the choices here. So you could, pick the ones that you're most confident with, pick the ones that you were actually in class for, and that you've covered the notes with and stuff like that. So I have a question. When is the test? So I'm going to assign it at the end of class here, and it's as I'll talk about, it's going to be like an open note thing. So it'll be due. The due date's going to be Sunday. So yeah. So as far as the short answer questions here, your responses should be thorough and answer all parts of the question. So there is no minimum number of sentences. So I didn't want to put a number on it and say it has to be at least 3 sentences or something like that, because then a lot of people will probably just hit the bare minimum and then think it's good enough and move on. Instead, I want you to kind of think about the question and make sure you answer all of the parts. Now, I do say that I expect that answers should be at least a paragraph or more, but it really depends on your writing and how well you can answer the questions, how much writing you're going to do. So I didn't want to put a number on it because I didn't want people to just try and get to that number or, stop after getting to that number or that sort of thing. So just making sure you're answering all parts of the question is going to be most important. Now, responses should be in complete sentences. Grammar and spelling are important as well because this is not like a live in-person sort of test where you're doing it all at once. I expect that you can take the extra time here to construct complete sentences, use the grammar and spell check tools that are available online to find any mistakes and make sure that your sentences are good. So yeah. Next, take your time. Each question is worth 10 points for a total of 30. So there are 5 questions. You pick 3 of them. 10 points for each one for a total of 30 points. And this is going in as a test grade. So those of us that have struggled with tests, we've only had 2 of them so far. And I know that's kind of having a negative impact on a lot of people's grades because of there only being 2. So this will be a good chance for you to improve your overall grade in this class by taking your time and doing well on this. And the final point here, use your notes. Put it all in bold. Made it bigger because it's really important. This is an open book and open note test. So use them, right? No reason not to. All of the notes are available on Google Classroom. So even if you were missing for something, you can find all of those notes on Google Classroom in the absent work section. So going to Google Classroom here, if you haven't taken a look yet, if you go to the classwork page here, under the section where it says absent, look here. Here is all of the notes that will be helpful to you. These are actually the topics that are covered in the questions. So we've got the Renaissance, Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, explorers, absolute monarchs, and then the Enlightenment and French Revolution that we just covered. So use those notes. Kind of going along with that, do not Google these questions. It's going to be super obvious if you do, because because you're using your notes, because you're using your textbook. I would expect that your answers will, use the information that are found in your notes and in your textbook. So if you suddenly come out of nowhere with an answer that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about in class, or anything that's on your notes, it's going to be pretty obvious, and I'll know that you probably Googled the answer, and it's not going to be a very good response. So your answer should use specific information that we covered in the notes. So just use your notes, use your textbook. Google's not going to be that helpful for you, because the questions directly take from the notes, and that's what you should be talking about. So that's kind of the basic rundown here of what to expect here with this short answer test. So are there any questions right now before I go over the questions themselves? Not yet. You cannot leave yet. Once I'm done going over the questions. Okay. So the questions, as I said, you're picking 3 of them. So the first question, we discussed the Black Death as being the end of feudalism in Europe. How did this lead to the rise of the Renaissance time period? What were the major economic, political, and social changes in Europe after the Black Death? Why does the name Renaissance make sense for this time period? Because what does it translate to? So talking about the Renaissance here, we had those stair-step notes that we did in class, also found on Google Classroom, going to be helpful in answering that question. Number 2, what were Martin Luther's problems with the Catholic Church? How did he bring his problems to the public eye, and how did the Pope respond? What were some of the differences between the Catholic Church and Protestant churches? So Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation, differences in churches there. Number 3, what were the motivations of European explorers during the Age of Exploration? What goals did these explorers have? Where did they want to go? How did Portugal reach their destination? How did Spain respond to this? So talking about explorers, where they were going, how they got there, kind of the outcomes of that. Number 4, describe the characteristics of an absolute monarch. How do they control their country? What is divine right? Use either King Henry VIII of England or King Louis XIV of France as an example, explaining why they are examples of an absolute monarch. And finally, question number 5, what were the main ideas of the Enlightenment? How did these new ideas about government and people lead to the French Revolution? What was the outcome of the French Revolution? So those last topics that we've covered since we went all virtual.